Oh, no.
Okay, it's 4:30, so we'll bring this meeting to order. We'll start with the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined us here today on Zoom. So we'll get right to the speakers. I don't see any speakers here in person. I have one that we received via email from Christina Hernandez. She wanted us to read this on her behalf. A lot of focus is happening on the hybrid model, while the distance learning model hasn't been discussed since entering phase 2. The DL students should be following the same pace and assignments as the hybrid model, and that is not happening. All distance learning teachers need to follow the same curriculum as the hybrid model. So we can bring in the other speakers. Our first speaker will be Lisa Ford. Hi, Lisa.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Can I say in a playful way, I hate how you guys always put me first? I'm sorry.
I
really,
thought you'd want
I just
to be
wanted
first,
to say, I don't know. No, I like commenting on after everybody else, but that's okay. I just want to say that I'm not sure how many people are speaking tonight, but I wanted to point out how fluid the situation is that, as far as the reopening discussion, that, numbers change, situation changes, and I believe parents' opinions also change. We did the survey, which I felt that Andy did a wonderful job with. Him and Lisa did a wonderful job with that, and I feel that before any new decisions are made, I would request that we do a new survey and see where people, where parents, the majority. We have some parents that are being very vocal right now, and I don't want those to be construed as what the majority are feeling right now. Thank you for the time to address you guys.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, we have Serena Collier.
Hi,
Hi.
Serena.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Sorry, my baby's screaming over here. Let me just good afternoon, members of the board and the Lakeside School District community. My name is Serena Collier, and I'm the parent of a 3rd and 1st grader in the Mandarin program at Riverview and Winter Gardens, as well as an educator trying to teach while supporting my children's learning at home. I'm speaking today to once again ask the board members of the Lakeside Union School District to make concrete plans to move to phase 3 of our reopening plan. I spoke at the board meeting last month, and we heard from many parents who were asking, some pleading, for you to reopen our schools. At the end of the meeting, after voting to extend phase 2, you decided to call the meeting today to discuss how and when to transition to the reopening of our schools, since a plan is yet to be made. I imagine many of the board members and LUSD staff are apprehensive about opening back 5 days a week. Some have expressed health concerns of the teachers as being the primary reason to delay reopenings, even though research has shown that children are not passing COVID-19 as adults do. Others have expressed the concern of not being able to socially distance in classrooms, even though our classes will not be as full as in traditional years, since not every child will be sent to school. And students will remain masked throughout the day also. Finally, others have argued that the data is telling us it's too soon to reopen. However, the data I've seen speaks differently. For example, Joseph Allen, associate professor at Harvard in the School of Public Health, refers to kids being out of K-12 schools as a national emergency due to the academic, social, and emotional losses of not being in the classroom. Just last week, Education Week interviewed a Dr. Jha, who argued that schools need to be bolder about reopening due to the low risk of transmission between children and adults. The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine states while it will be impossible for schools to entirely eliminate the risk of COVID-19, the reports say young children in particular will be impacted by not having in-person learning and may suffer long-term academic consequences if they fall behind. In K-3, children are still developing the skills to regulate their own behavior, emotions, and attention, and therefore struggle with distance learning, as my children are doing. Schools should prioritize reopening for grades K-5 and for students with special needs who would best be served by in-person instruction. And that's, again, from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And finally, the American Association of Pediatrics argues for reopening schools because of the indirect negative effects of school closures on academic learning and child mental and physical health, and their long-term consequences. I'm asking you today to please give parents the option to send our kids back to school 5 days a week. I'm not asking you to mandate all children return to school full-time. There are parents listening now that have already chosen the Home Flex program or the full-time distance learning. But I'm asking you to think about the rest of us. There are many parents listening who are struggling through this current education model. Parents who are working full-time and can't sit with their children to help with their education. Parents who don't have degrees in education who are sitting next to a struggling reader, unsure how to help them. We are struggling. Parents are struggling, some more than others. Children are struggling, some more than others. And you have the ability to support the community that you are elected to serve, and you're actively choosing not to, despite the fact that our very cautious governor has allowed schools in our situation to finally fully reopen. Those of us in education have heard over and over, early intervention is key. But how are our educators expected to provide intervention support to students they only see 1 or 2 days a week? As a credentialed reading specialist, there are a few statistics that stand out to me. The American Federation of Teachers explained there's a nearly 90% chance that a poor reader in first grade will remain a poor reader without direct intensive instruction.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Serena.
Next, we have Michelle Beaver.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can. Michelle, welcome.
Okay. Can I be on video? Or is my picture fine?
The picture's fine.
Okay. All right. Some of you may know that many of my family members contracted COVID-19, and though none of them died, the effects have been devastating. It's true that the national death rate has decreased, but many people that get the virus continue to have long-term health problems with no idea of how the virus will affect them for months, years, or even a lifetime. The other day, I heard a parent say that as she interacts with others in our Lakeside community, no one is really practicing social distancing. She said that the safety recommendations are being ignored while her children are having get-togethers and sleepovers with other children in the community that are outside of her home. This was given as an argument for why the school should forego our hybrid programs and open full-time. If adhering to guidelines is too difficult for some to follow, I propose that we heighten our efforts and take additional steps to provide a safe environment for our staff and students. Instead of returning to full-time classes, maybe we need to return to distance learning for the safety of our families, students, and staff that are serious about respecting science and one another. Maybe we all need further education. Do our parents and staff know that 40% of those infected do not have any symptoms? That means we're up against an invisible enemy. Our district has provided excellent training on strategies that teachers can use to protect students during a school shooting. But our training for fighting this invisible enemy needs to be more robust. Do our staff members know that wearing a face shield alone is not an adequate barrier to stop the spread of the virus? Has anyone been taught the safest way to remove a face mask and how often they should be cleaned or replaced? Do people know that gaiter masks allow the virus to become smaller and actually become more infectious? Our state is in the purple tier, but not all of our county meets the metrics for being in this tier. Unfortunately, Lakeside does. One metric used to determine is positivity rate. That would be how many people out of 100 tested positive for COVID. Anything above 8 can put the county into the purple tier. At the moment, Lakeside's positivity rate is 16.6. Surrounding cities, it is not that high. It's barely over 8. So this is showing there is a problem of community spread here in Lakeside. Our staff needs to feel comfortable going to work. We've built fences around our schools to keep us safe from lone wolf shooters, but the only fence we have to protect us from this pandemic is people listening to the experts and our leaders to make choices that help keep our families, students, and teachers safe. That's all.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Next, we have David Hartwig.
Hi, David.
Oh, hello. Yeah, just that a little bit. Hello, board members and administrators. David Hartwig. I teach math at Lakeside Middle School. And I had Lisa send out something that we're doing at math at our site. And when you get a chance to read that, that's fine. What we're trying to do is realize that math is a little bit different than every other subjects. Just like teaching at the middle school is different than K-5 situation. I'm hoping we can put a pause on this of changing out of the hybrid. The current hybrid, I think, is working. It's just that we have to give it some time to develop with parents, students, and teachers. What I'm finding as a parent as well as my wife with my child, it is frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us. And I am hearing all these parents talk, and I agree, it's frustrating. But let's pause on the hybrid and stay with what we're doing for right now and make it better. For instance, we do in the math, what works with math is we Zoom at home, whether they're asynchronous or synchronous, cohort A or cohort B. One of our math teachers stays with the cohort A and cohort B, and that works for those 6th graders that are coming in, and the work she puts in to make sure they're getting the content is unbelievable. What works for others is to make kids more accountable is I Zoom in the classroom and Zoom at home, and I take a little roll call to see who's on the Zoom at home, and I let the parents know if they weren't on Zoom. The communication of letting the parents know what their child's doing, what they need to do, the lesson they might have missed is, I think you can't rate it. I think it's the best we can do, but it's gonna take time. For instance, we found out a lot of students weren't doing their work. We sent messages home. We created at our middle school anyway, we created tutoring, special tutoring services for after school via Zoom. I know a lot of teachers do Zoom after crew on Wednesdays to develop that on their own time to work with the students. We also have academic support classes that we put these students in. So we are finding the holes in the hybrid that might some students drop through to give them that extra support and help. It is frustrating for parents. And I think if you switch gears right now, it's gonna be more frustrating because now it's another schedule they have to worry about. I think they're used to the schedule. I think we're tweaking it as we go to make it even better. This is all new to us, obviously. So I prefer not you changing a model. But some of the things we're doing is like I said, the tutoring, the Zooming at home, whether they're at home or in school, keeping track of them, letting the parents know what's going on. And at the middle school level, that works the best. I'm not saying it works, K-5 is a completely different situation, but in the cohort system might work for them. But the Zooming for home and here for mathematics does work for us, but it might not work for language arts. So I think having these different systems that work for students, work for parents, and they're getting used to it, the continuity, I think the parents in the community will at least appreciate, especially when we stay in hybrid learning. I'd rather see us stay at hybrid learning than go to full distance, because I think there is some advantages to students coming into school, feeling like a kid, at least getting on campus. We forget how hard this is just on being a kid. You know, that's why I teach 8th grade, because I know what I was like as a kid. I turned out somewhat normal, I think. Well, don't ask my wife, but I think I turned out all right. But kids have to be kids too. And this is new for them. And to teach them responsibility and accountability, that just doesn't happen overnight. That does take time. I think we got great kids in our schools, but when they reach the middle school level, especially 8th grade, 7th grade, you know, they're a different kind of animal, let me say. And they need structure, but they also need, they're just being a kid. And sometimes they don't realize the consequences of them not getting an assignment done. That's why we accepted all A work. We reminded the parents, the student got it. I had a lot of students bring up their grades within just the last 2 weeks, from D's and F's up to C's. Why? Because they got their work done. We helped them with tutoring.
Mr. Hartwig, your time is up.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, David.
Sure, you're welcome.
Next up, we have Autumn Ellenson.
Hi, Autumn.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am here once again to speak on behalf of opening up to phase 3. A parent suggested just a couple of speakers ago that we follow the science, and I could not agree more. The most recent evidence suggests that children are not passing COVID to adults readily, and that wearing masks works. So when you combine children and masks, especially in the elementary school situation, then it works. Mitigation is working. And these are rabies experts that have over 30 years in the field. How much more expert can you get? I also acknowledge that perhaps we need to have 2 different plans. One for middle school, since they're teenagers, they're adolescents, they're a little bit out of the same category as the young children, and one for elementary school. I completely understand that. And I don't understand why we can't maybe have 2 different plans that work for the 2 different situations. We parents have adapted as best we could, as best we can for as long as we can. But this is just not sustainable. I'm a single mom. I teach full time and I write in the evenings just to make ends meet. And I'm talking about needing to have a roof over my children's head. I'm a teacher myself. I teach online. And I have seen how online teaching is only for a very small percentage of the population. I've taught online for 3 years. I know that I speak for half of the parents in this district that are either too shy or too angry to speak out, but we're frustrated, we're struggling. And since the evidence supports that children are not passing this to adults, I don't understand what the issue is. Should we mitigate and be cautious? Absolutely. I do my part. I wear my mask, I socially distance, I keep my circle small. I am doing my part. Of course we should do that. But it has been so long and we cannot go on this way. It is unfair to over half of our children and families in this district. We should absolutely listen to the experts and mitigate as much as we can. But what the experts are now saying, based on the most recent evidence, is that children are not passing this to adults. And that is even without a mask. So I don't understand what the issue is. This was supposed to be a temporary solution. I've stood by you. I was fully supportive of this board until 1 month ago when I felt like the rug was pulled out from under my feet. This board told us that we were in a temporary situation. We battened down the hatches. We stood by you. We did everything that we were supposed to do. And it was less than 1 week prior to phase 3 opening that you informed us you had no real plan to open. How is that okay? You guys are our voted officials supposed to be supporting our families. I don't understand how you think that was okay to do that to us. This pandemic may not end for a year or 2, or like polio in the 50s. What if it's 4 years long? Are you suggesting that we don't make a plan? We just tuck our head beneath the pillow. This is how it's going to be the next 4 years. We need to make a plan now. I plead with this board to live up to what you told us for months and make. That doesn't mean we're opening tomorrow, but now is the time that we start planning to open up for the 5 days. so that we know exactly what we're going to do. I hate that we're in this pandemic, but it's time to figure out how to live within this. Now is the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn.
Next up is Rob Shield.
Hi, Rob.
Hello, I'm Rob Shield, 8th grade social studies teacher at TDS. You probably know I also happen to be president of the Grossmont School Board. And I mention that only to let you know that I do understand the intense and diverse pressures you're under as a board. I'm tired. I am continually pushed toward my limits to creatively respond with goodwill and grace to the ever-changing dictates of district leadership. Approximately a month ago, I spoke at length with the superintendent about my concerns. I told him, quote, "I've done something I've never done in my 22 years as a teacher. I gave up because I genuinely care about my students and their future, especially as they get drugged through this whole COVID mess. I will continue to fight my way back to hope for my students and their parents. However, here's some personal conclusions I've come to since March 13th. 1, district-wide decisions are made on an ad hoc basis to solve the latest crisis caused by the latest bad decision. 2, major philosophical and structural changes are made about every 7 weeks. Keep in mind it takes around 4 weeks to fully implement the last mandate. 3, district decisions are motivated more by reactionary fear than trying to support student welfare. Radical, jolting changes are now the norm. Why should I spend significant time, energy, and goodwill implementing another change that's only going to last for 7 weeks? As a former member of the negotiating team, I watched with dismay as you dismantled a 40-plus year history of high trust between management, the teachers, and the community. The culture of promoting from within to create a trusting environment has been replaced with rigid, adversarial culture. Gone is what made Lakeside special. It would be easy to be dismissive and say that times change. True enough, but in my 18 years on the Grossmont board, I've seen significant momentum in a positive direction. The people at the dais set the culture of the district. Is this really what you want? I am simply asking you to do your job and only your job. Stop trying to solve problems that you neither have the expertise or knowledge to solve. You're elected to represent the public as overseers of the district. In a perfect world, you'd have very little to do. The day-to-day decisions are delegated to people who are well paid and have far more training than you or I. Get your leadership team to do their job of leading the district. Stop the constant jolting course changes that only create chaos in the classroom. Don't let them blame it on COVID. I still have a wealth of goodwill to respond to mandates from various health departments and Governor Newsom. But I've run out of goodwill taking the heat from students and parents for unvetted decisions imposed by people involved in this meeting. Please ask good questions. Don't accept vague answers. As a board member, I do not allow myself to be bamboozled into supporting mediocre and arbitrary changes. Make it clear that evaluations will be based on the consequences of these decisions they're making. After all, every teacher and student is continually investing time and energy that could be better spent on learning. Be an excellent overseer with a healthy skepticism of another new idea to fix everything. Force the administration at the dais to convince you that they've thoroughly researched their latest changes. What is their plan for implementation? Quote, giving middle schools flexibility for implementation, unquote, is what I have found to be code for, we don't have a clue. Let the teachers figure it out.
Mr. Shields, your time is up.
Thank you.
Next up is Karen Castro.
So I'm going to be short. I am a teacher and a parent and of a student who is in Lakeside School District. So I'm speaking from both a perspective of a parent and as an educator. So the number of COVID cases are on the rise again in our city and across the United States. I feel like to think about moving into reopening schools again, or even make a decision about when to at this point, would be reckless. I know that the number of children getting and spreading, or the number of children getting and spreading COVID is growing every day. The number of children who die from COVID is small, but I'm not prepared for that to be my child. So I know people want their kids back in school. I know it's really, really hard. But I just ask that we not rush into anything because people want it to happen, or more people want everyone to go back into school. I want our kids to be safe, and all the teachers and all the people who work in schools to be safe. And we're moving back into an upswing. I don't think it's safe to start making plans to completely reopen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any
The
more?
last speaker is Lisa Larson.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lisa Larson, and I have a child at Lakeside Farms Elementary. The number of COVID cases in the Lakeside School District is rising steadily. San Diego County COVID cases have skyrocketed to 1,087 a day, which is an all-time high. The number of cases in the United States is growing exponentially. The US first surpassed 100,000 new daily cases on November 5th, and it has continued to break the daily record since, recording 184,000 new cases on Friday. Schools across the nation are closing and going back to distance learning. Now is not the time to be considering a full-time school reopening. We would all love for COVID to be over, but it isn't, and it won't be for some time. Simply wishing something to happen is not going to change reality. Teachers and parents continue to express their desire not to return to full-time. The teachers overwhelmingly do not want to return to school full-time, and their opinion should be heeded, not discounted. There simply is not enough room in the classrooms to maintain the required 6-foot social distance separation between students, and doubling class sizes would increase the likelihood of more positive cases. The students are going to come into a lot more contact of people in and out of the classrooms. On top of that, we have parents who brag at board meetings about how they are not social distancing and continue to meet up with other families and have sleepovers. This goes against everything that the experts are advising: wearing masks, social distancing, limiting gatherings with other households. And they are putting our kids, teachers, and families at risk. I urge the board to stay with the hybrid system. Now is not the time to return to school full-time, much less make a decision on how to proceed in the future. The health and safety of our students, teachers, and families is paramount and must come first. Doing what is right is not always easy and may not always be popular, but it is vitally important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the last speaker, Lisa? Okay. Well, thank you to everyone who spoke. Our first item of business is just a real quick update to the calendar. So would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Any discussion on the change to the calendar? All in favor? Aye. We can just- Okay. Now we will get to the discussion part of the meeting. Dr. Johnson?
Thank you. So trustees, we appreciate the time, the opportunity to speak about the district's reopening plans and timelines. Dr. Reed, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, has a presentation, and she'll be joined by Christine Sinatra, our Special Ed Director, as well. Before she gets started, I just want to make a couple of opening comments that I think are important. And some of these will be repeated in the presentation here, but I think they're important to kind of get out at the beginning. First thing, I think it goes without saying that none of us is happy with operating schools in the pandemic. I mean, nobody likes where we are. I think we would all rather be back before March 12th, March 13th, right? Back in, doing school the way we know how to do it. That's what we all want. But here we are, so we have to figure out what we do. I want to say that many of the comments that we've heard tonight and in other meetings as well have validity to them. I've mentioned before that I'm a parent of a senior in high school and a 7th grader in a neighboring district, and they're still full distance learning since March. And I'm experiencing from my own perspective at home what that's like, and I know it's tough. So when parents talk about the mental health challenges, those are real. When they talk about their struggles, those are real. When teachers talk about different changes that we've had, those are real too. I get it. I just want to say that Lakeside and our administrative team here is in the same position that every district in the county and across the state, across the country are in. And it's a volatile environment. It's been changing on us since March 13th. So we've done our very best as a leadership team to respond to the things that are coming at us in a way that tries to maintain as much consistency and stability for our community and for our school as possible. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's really difficult, but that has always been our goal. I want to say this before we get into the presentation. If the board wants us to open full time, we can do that. A couple of comments have been made in this meeting and previous meetings about how come the district doesn't have a plan. We have a plan to reopen our schools full time. We just go back to what we normally did. If the board at any point in time takes action to open our schools and go back to 5 days a week, we need 3-4 weeks, get our staffing back in place, have the principals readjust their schedules back to what they used to be with some of the safety protocols in place. We can make that happen. I do want to say that if we're going to do that, there are a couple of important considerations that we just need to have in mind, and we would have to go into that with our eyes wide open. The first one is this. Through all of these different models, there are a whole number of variables that we can tweak, we can adjust, that are completely within our control. Student academic schedules, daily school schedules, start and end times, ESS, food service, transportation. We can tweak and modify any of those variables. There's one that we can't do anything about, and that's the health department's guidelines and requirements around quarantining when you have a positive case. So let me just say, there's been a lot of discussion about 6 feet between students. I wanted to be very clear. We talked about this back in July, but it's been a long time ago. In the current and still operative California Department of Health guidelines, 6 feet between the teacher desk and the student desks is required. We have that in place. 6 feet between student desks is not required. The guidance says distance your students to the greatest extent practicable. So we do not have to distance them for 6 feet. So that one's adjustable too. But the local health HHSA here in San Diego has said, they've released the decision tree that we talked about a couple meetings ago. They have said when there is a positive case, I think that's important to note. They didn't say if, they said when, because the health department always anticipated that schools would experience positive cases. When you have a positive case, whether a staff or a student, we must quarantine for 14 days anybody, any person, staff or student, who is within 6 feet of that positive case for more than 15 minutes in a 24-hour period. Okay, that one we have to live with, and we have to follow those guidelines. That one we can't tweak, right? So we've had, since the time we've been open, we've had 7 positive student cases. In each one of those, when Dr. Winspear and the team have engaged their tracing protocols alongside the HHSA, because we're always in consultation with them on those, in each one of those 7 cases so far, no other person has been identified as needing to quarantine. So those 7 students have gone home on their own, they've quarantined, and many of them have come back. There was one staff case that we had in a preschool classroom where the teacher was within proximity of their preschooler, so it's impossible to stay 6 feet apart from them. So that class did have to close down and go back to distance learning for 2 weeks. That's the only class closure we've had. So I say that just to say, again, we can go back and we can open our classrooms full time. We would just need to know that if there are positive cases, we would run the risk of larger numbers of students being quarantined, possible class closures, possible school closures if those numbers get even higher. We've seen that happen in Vista and most recently Escondido. So that's not advocating one way or another. That's simply kind of the objective fact that we have to work with. The second thing that would be really important to consider, as has been mentioned, we did survey our parents not long ago, and many of them said, in our last survey, it was about 50% of our parents said we're ready to come back full time. There was about 38% of our parents who said they like the hybrid model, that the hybrid models are what they would prefer. So if we were to open schools full time, what would that segment of our parents, what would they choose? Granting that people's minds change, I totally understand that. As the county goes purple and goes back to red, people have different ideas. But let's just say recognize that there is a segment of our parents who are comfortable with hybrid. Now, if we were to open full time, what will they do? I would guess that some of them would say, well, at this point, I've seen the protocols, I'm comfortable. They would come back 5 days a week. I'm certain that there are a number of those parents who would say, I'm not comfortable with that, and we're now going to request distance learning. That would cause us a problem, a logistical problem, an operational problem, because our distance learning classes are currently fairly full. Almost all of them are full. So we would have to then probably do a reorganization of our distance learning classes to accommodate folks who are requesting to go back to distance learning. Again, not advocating one way or another. That's just simply the second thing we would have to keep in mind. And the third one would then, of course, would be staff readiness for this, as has been mentioned. So I think, again, as a staff, we are ready logistically to come back full time if that's what the board wants, but we'd have to have those 3 things in mind. The other thing I want to say is that we've learned a lot along with all other districts. So we've been closed since March 13th. The reopening started in the fall. There have been across the county pretty much kind of 3 different approaches to reopening. There are some districts who have taken a very cautious approach and they're still closed. They're still full-time distance learning. There have been others on the opposite extreme who have opened fully or attempted to open fully. Our friends up in Vista, that's one good example, who they attempted to open fully, and pretty much right away they were faced with school closures and classroom closures. It's just not to say that would happen here, but that is an experience that they have had. And then there are others kind of in the middle. Most of us are in the middle somewhere with a hybrid kind of a model. There are different models for that. I do want to say there are 2 other districts who did open full-time and they were able to keep the distance. That's Rancho Santa Fe and Del Mar. Both of those are funded differently than we are, so they've got a significant amount of funds that they were able to hire teachers, and they had 2 things. They had funds to hire extra teachers, and they had extra space to be able to space their kids out. They had empty classrooms in their campuses, neither of which we have. So that's just it's just something to keep in mind there. So what the board has asked us to do in the past couple of meetings is to present possible models for more in-person time for our special education students, which are here this evening. You will hear this evening. Secondly, to present possible models for a 5-day week instruction, which you will also hear, and then possible refinements to our current hybrid model. So with that, I'll have Dr. Reed begin, and then to go through your presentation, and then we can open up for discussion. Yes, I believe so. The guidelines we have from the county are, now that the county is back in purple, the rule is even if a district had opened or had begun its reopening plan, even if it was a phased-in plan, they can stay open and continue with their reopening plans.
Chris Sinatra, our Director of Special Ed, will be joining me in this conversation. As Andy mentioned, you ask us to come with an improved hybrid model, and you also ask us to come with a 5-day-a-week model. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the potential benefits and some of the potential barriers that are involved in these models. We have a primary goal. So the primary lens that we're looking at these models through is that we want equitable outcomes for all of our students. We want to make sure that both our students and our staff are safe. And we need consistency in an evolving set of circumstances that you heard some of our teachers mentioning. So Andy also mentioned that there's sources for this information. I'll say that this is more of a constraint as opposed to a source. This California Department of Ed and the health department sets requirements that we needed to take into consideration that were inflexible. We also needed to look at our transportation, food service, and custodial schedules when we looked at all of these different models. We took the input of parents and staff through that thought exchange survey. We had a thorough analysis of the hybrid model that teachers and principals participated in. And then we had a discussion with our PTA council, and all of that information will be presented. So our first process, the process that we used was we collected the data. Then we applied those state and local requirements. Then we reviewed some potential models. And with the district leadership, district admin team, we're going to make some collective, less collective recommendations and more letting you know kind of what we're working on right now. All right, so here's what the data told us. The data told us that parents and staff were interested in safety for students first and foremost. They also told us that the current model that we're in currently has resulted in high levels of perceived safety. There was some concern about the volatility of our current context. Students and staff that are in quarantine or moving in and out of quarantine, students moving in and out of distance learning, cohorts, classes, schools, and even districts that could potentially be shut down due to outbreaks. Equitable access to high quality instruction. The data tells us that we need to be concerned with students with special needs, students who thrive on peer interaction, students who need to engage with staff every day, and our staff's ability to provide timely feedback for all of our students. We also learned that improved asynchronous learning was required. There's a lot of pressure on parents with our asynchronous model. Parents are concerned that some of our asynchronous work is just busy work. And then the high DNF rates as students fail to turn in work. I'll tell you that is an issue that's come up across the county. I do want to take a moment just to explain, as I mentioned last time when I talked about DNF rates, we're not at the end of the semester yet. Many of the DNF rates I showed you in the data last year will be cleared up as students turn in work. There was a difference between the TDS and the LMS DNF rates. The staff at Tierra del Sol took a different approach than the staff at Lakeside Middle School. Lakeside Middle School continued to use Jupyter grades. Tierra del Sol tried to start using Schoology. Schoology wasn't up and running yet, but they tried to make that switch. They're trying to be future forward thinking. So I think part of what the discrepancy in the data might have come from LMS having the Jupyter grades and being able to inform their parents and parents working to clear those, and TDS not having that system until they went back to Jupyter grades. More consistency and less disruption. You heard some of our teachers and parents talking about this disruption, the constant changes. I think somebody mentioned it, that it's a jolt in the jolting course directions. Teachers talk about switching models just when we just got the hang of the last one, and parents talk about disruptions in schedules, childcare, transportation, work schedules. I think Dr. Johnson had input from the PTA council. Please do not change the schedule again. Please don't do that again. As we looked at the hybrid model, we did want to take from it what is working, and there are some things that are working from the hybrid model. There's increased impact due to those smaller class sizes. We've seen increased engagement. We've seen individualized instruction. We've seen fewer behavior disruptions. We've seen deeper relationships being formed between the teachers and the students. And then it's just easier to implement those safety protocols when there's a smaller group of students. So here's some potential models that we looked at. The 5-day-a-week model. And the 5-day-a-week model looks like, as you can see the dots, students coming to school five days a week. The potential benefits are that all students are at school every day. We're getting closer to that equitable access to instruction. There is no asynchronous learning for us to have to deal with. And it looks like a return to normal for parents, students, and staff. And I use normal in quotation marks because of course we would still need to implement the safety protocols. Some potential barriers. there would be no social distancing. We could not maintain social distancing with our current class sizes. Because of no social distancing, there would be an increased chance of a cohort or a class or a school or a district shutdown. There's limited work for quarantine students, or students that go out onto quarantine. They participate in asynchronous work, and that limits their exposure to high quality instruction. And as Dr. Johnson mentioned, we have a limited space in the distance learning strand for families who decide that they don't want to go into this 5-day a week, and we heard from several parents tonight. We have already gone through one major shift. When we finished distance learning and said, okay, we're going into the hybrid model, we saw a large amount of parents wanting to move into the distance learning strand, which caused us to have to bring more teachers, pull teachers out of the hybrid and put them into distance learning, which caused a ripple effect in the hybrid because all those students had to be reshuffled. We put those students into the distance learning strand, which caused a reshuffle in all the distance learning classes. So even the switch of 1, 2, 3 teachers has a ripple effect on both sides. So that was I'm sure you're probably still hearing feedback about that for parents, from teachers. It was significant. All right, so the pivotal piece there is that social distancing piece. Everything that I present to you afterwards is around a improved hybrid model. All of these pieces have social distancing built inherent into them. Just a review on the hybrid model. Again, we did that analysis and we heard from staff about what is working in the hybrid model. The impact is one thing that was mentioned repeatedly. Individualized instruction, increased engagement, fewer disruptions due to behavior. Safety, social distancing is inherent in our hybrid model, and the ease of implementing those safety protocols, and then those deep relationships that our teachers were able to build with their students. There are some things that need revision. One of those things is, well, most of those things revolve around the asynchronous learning. Students were going to school Monday and Tuesday, and then they were out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, when they were supposed to be doing asynchronous work. If they ran into a problem or they needed to talk to their teacher, they, without reaching out, they wouldn't have a natural access to those students to those teachers for 5 days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they're back again on Monday. So that was something that staff, principals, parents brought up as a problem. Again, that supporting parents, lifting some of that burden off parents. We know that asynchronous learning places a significant burden on parents. Staff's ability to give timely feedback. That was something that is important to our district as a whole, and it's difficult to do in our current hybrid model. And just the need to engage with students every single day, not just because they've reached out, but the required engagement with students every day. So before I present to you some models, I'm going to talk to you about Wednesday, and I have a quote here from our side letter with LTA, but it mentions synchronous and asynchronous learning. Whenever there's, we know that when we shifted this learning model, it's different. It's not what we used to do. Asynchronous lessons are different than synchronous lessons, or even different than homework. So it requires a different level of engagement on the part of the teacher. It also requires a significant level of number of minutes, teachers looking over the work that's been turned in, giving feedback on that. That feedback is important not only instructionally, but the feedback is important to have kids continually turning in work. So when we present to you a model that has asynchronous work involved, we've reserved that Wednesday for teachers to be able to do that work. We also recognize that some of these models are going to require some professional learning on the part of teachers, and some of that work could be done on a Wednesday. So, the planning could be done on a Wednesday. The first model I'm going to talk to you about is an AM-PM model. So the AM-PM looks like students coming to school 4 days a week. Half the students, so there would be a class of 24, for example, half the kids would come in the morning, half of the students would come in the afternoon, so they're smaller class sizes, so we could still be socially distanced. Some of the benefits to that are that all students would be at school for half a day, 4 days a week. We could maintain social distancing. Particularly in kindergarten, there's special benefits for kindergarten. Kindergarten only has a required 180 instructional minutes. So for kindergarten, there would actually be an increase in instructional minutes over what we currently have now. There would be no asynchronous learning involved for them. And so we could actually do a 5-day-a-week schedule with an early release on Wednesdays to allow teachers to participate in their PLC. That has instructional benefits for our primary learners. So there's some potential there. Some of the potential barriers would be that it still requires asynchronous learning for 1st through 8th. It actually reduces the in-person instruction for 6th through 8. It provides an inability for us to offer transportation for general ed students. And it is the model, because we're currently on hybrid, where A students come on Monday, Tuesday, and B students come on Thursday, Friday. This is the most disruptive to our current schedule. It would change the schedule for teachers, for parents, and for students. And I'll let Chris speak to the special day class implications for the AMP model.
Hi, so this model could be implemented alongside the general education model, and it would result in about 2 additional hours per week of classroom learning for our SDC students.
Chris, would you repeat that while our board members put their earphones back in?
Oh, sure, sorry. So this model could be implemented alongside the general education model and would result in about 2 additional hours per week of in-classroom learning for our special day class students.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome.
The next model I'm going to talk to you about is still that AB cohort like we're currently in, but with a virtual alternate cohort. So if you'll follow the dots, on Monday and Tuesday, A cohort would be in school in person. When those students go home, B cohort would Zoom in virtually in the afternoon. On Thursday, Friday, B cohort would be in person, and A cohort would Zoom in virtually on Thursday and Friday in the afternoon after B cohort went home. And on Wednesday, no students are on campus, but both A cohort and B cohort would participate virtually for part of the day. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
So when, okay, let's go back to Monday and Tuesday when you have the A cohort there. Are they there the entire day when B cohort zooms in for the half of the day, or they're going home half the day?
No, it wouldn't be a half a day, but they would have to go home early so that the B cohort could Zoom in. And you'll see the implications of that in just a moment. Good question. So this model provides that daily interaction with peers and with teachers that we were talking about earlier. It does include social distancing, and it does provide that accountability and support for that asynchronous work. A student wouldn't go days without having contact with the teacher. Some of the potential barriers are it actually, because the part that Rhonda just mentioned, it would provide the fewest in-person instructional minutes for all grade levels of all the models that I'm presenting, because you would have to reduce the instructional minutes for the students that are in person to allow for the virtual learning. So in effect, you're swapping in-person minutes in a day for the virtual minutes. It also still requires asynchronous instruction on the off days for 1st through 8th. And Chris?
For special day class, it would be neutral for instructional time overall, and virtual instruction will be possible, but likely present challenges for our atypical learners.
So the next model I want to talk to you about is called concurrent instruction. So it looks like this. It looks like when the A cohort is there on Monday and Tuesday, you see the bigger yellow dots. So A cohort is there on Monday, Tuesday. B cohort is zooming in for a portion of the day, not the entire day, but they're actually there concurrently. They're receiving instruction concurrently. On Thursday and Friday, B cohort is there in person. A cohort is zooming in, not the whole entire day, but for portions of the day. And then on Wednesday, no students are on campus, but both cohorts are there virtually. So the potential benefits there, again, the daily interaction with teachers and peers, we can maintain social distancing. This is one of the models another model that provides equitable access to instruction. It is the most flexible model, and I'll explain that. So if you have a student that has to go into quarantine, there's something that happens, they're exposed, they're at home playing with a group of kids and they're exposed and they have to go into quarantine. The student is in class in the morning. They have to be quarantined in the afternoon. The only change is they just go home and then they start Zooming in. That's the only change. If a parent decides that they want to be in the distance learning, in just straight distance learning, right now what they have to do is they have to be pulled out of the hybrid and put into the distance learning strand. Different teacher. In this situation, if a parent wanted to stay home, wanted their student to go into distance learning for a short amount of time, an extended amount of time, same teacher, all that would happen is the student would just stay on the virtual model in the same classroom. If the whole classroom had to shut down, if the whole district had to shut down, again, it would just, they could pick up the very next day with the same instruction that they were doing. It is by far the most flexible model considering our inconsistent environment that we're in. It is less disruptive than other models, as we heard our teachers and our parents say, just jolts and moves. We can't tolerate many more moves, changes like this. And this is less disruptive than the other models because, as I previously mentioned, but also the fact that it's still in the AB cohort. We still have AB cohorts. We wouldn't have to change anything about that. Potential barriers. This requires teacher training. There are some teachers in our district. You heard Jim Rosa at our last meeting. You saw some pictures and some examples of his teachers doing this kind of work. You even heard David Hartwig talking about he's talking about hybrid model, but what he's doing is he's Zooming students in while he's got kids, and that's a concurrent teaching. He's teaching concurrently. So teachers are doing this all over the district. But not everybody's doing it. So it will require some teacher training. It'll also require additional purchases of equipment. So we're talking about iPad stands, some additional iPads. It'll require things like that. So I want to kind of show you what that looks like. This is Lena Cortez. She's a 4th grade teacher at Lakeside Farms. You'll need your earphones in because this will be a video. And you'll see kids on her screen behind her, and those are the kids that are zooming in, and you'll see kids that are in front of her. And she's teaching a lesson just like you walked into her classroom and seen her teach 100 times. A phenomenal lesson. Lena's a phenomenal teacher. But pay attention to what's happening between the students that are virtual and the students that are in their classroom. Sorry? No sound? Yeah. How about now? Turn the volume. Can they need to turn their volume up on there? I wonder if I just played it through my. It's good. It's definitely. I just pull this out and play it out loud for everybody?
Knee to knee with Jack. Who's knee to knee with Jack right now?
Okay.
Right, Higgins, it's right there. They're touching knee to knee. How do you think Jack and Fraser would feel seeing that the thief that stole their money at the beginning is sitting right across from them in the stagecoach? If you have thought, let's raise our hand. Tina, what do you think?
They're probably scared to heck.
They're scared. They're a little bit scared. They're gonna not trust him. You're right. They're not gonna trust him. Before he was pretending to be. They found their money, but they're not gonna trust him. They're gonna keep an eye on him. And something happens while on the stagecoach, and that was chapter 10 that you listened to yesterday. What happened on their way to the diggings? Riley.
Some robbers came and took all their stuff.
Exactly. They're on the stagecoach. They have to get out because they're going to push the stagecoach over the hill. So
Can I be reading chapter 11?
Well, I know you want to read more, but we're going to stop right here on chapter 10. And I want you to go into Google Classroom. Okay, you should have already gotten a question from me.
Yeah.
For me. And remember, once you answer your question, you can respond to 3 other questions positively, giving encouragement whether you agree or disagree with them. So AJ at home is saying, I agree because the robbers didn't see the gold, perhaps. Okay, if you want to respond to AJ, you can. Tatum is because he good punched like Hercules, and it was strong as an anvil. Okay, I like that you're mentioning the text too, Tatum. That's good. Remember, you can answer to each other.
So that's a sample of what concurrent learning would look like in the classroom. This is what special day class and concurrent instruction would look like.
Okay, so for special day class, this would provide for more instructional time overall, but it would be virtual, and the virtual instruction will be possible, but likely present challenges for atypical learners.
So Chris, what would the best special day class model look like?
Well, the more often we can see our special day class students, the better we're going to be, because they need to have continuous learning, and it needs to be given in a manner that they can review and then move forward, and it needs to happen a little bit more often. So the concurrent special day class model, along with the general ed, might be the best, because at least they'd be getting instruction every day per week. But again, for some students, we still would have some of those challenges that could be overcome, but there would be some challenges. So the most important thing, I think, we've been working really hard, Dr. Winsberry, myself, and the district principals, we've been meeting with our SDC class teachers, and we've been discussing and planning for our returning special day class students to full class instruction for 4 full days per week. And so there's a lot of pros to that, and there's some challenges to that as well. So this would double the amount of current in-class instructional time. And in order to achieve this safely, we would have to have additional staff. And once we do have staff in place, we could set a target date.
Thank you, Chris. So here's what we're currently working on. We're currently working on a potential AM/PM model for kindergarten. Because of the no asynchronous learning, they only have 180 instructional minutes. We think this might work because of the lack of asynchronous minutes. Our next step is to see if this is what our kindergarten families would want. As Chris mentioned, we're looking at this SDC 4 full days per week to limit the virtual instruction for our special day class students. We're looking at a 1st through 8th concurrent model because of its flexibility, because it's less disruptive than the other models, because it increases live instruction. However, as I mentioned before, there's considerable work on the part of the teachers to prepare for this concurrent model. So I would say that if we were thinking about a long-term plan, something that would get us through several months, potentially till the end of the year, this concurrent model looks like something that would have a lot of benefit for us. If we were thinking about a short-term fix, I personally, the input that I would have is I would be cautious about trying to make all these changes if what we're looking for is a short-term fix. If we, for instance, if we plan on coming back full in a couple of months, this may not be the direction that we want to go. So our next steps. We need to discuss with principals and teachers what an equity-based instructional delivery model would look like. We need to survey our staff and find out what supports and professional learning opportunities they would need to be able to implement these models with ease. Again, I mentioned we need to survey our kindergarten families and find out if this AB model would work for them. And we have some other steps out, but our target date to begin implementation would be January 18th. So I'll pause there, see if you have any questions about that, about my presentation. I'm happy to go back.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I did have a question. So this target date to begin implementation is, you say, for concurrent on January 18th, the concurrent model just discussed.
Concurrent, AM, PM, again, we have what we're working on is concurrent, AM, PM for kinder, and 4 days a week for SDC.
Okay. And does this survey, are we including parents in this survey as well?
So this data includes the surveys, the thought exchange survey, and we would survey our kindergarten families to determine if that AB model would work for them.
But do we have an intention to ask parents again about what they feel about this?
It's not currently. It's something we can absolutely build in.
Okay.
Other questions of Kim or Natalie or Chris?
I certainly have a bunch more questions. I just didn't know if there's any more coming forward.
That's the end.
I would just add that, and I kind of alluded to, none of us has a crystal ball to know what's going to happen over the next 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12 months. And so what we're trying to think about right now is what model is the most flexible that would work in any situation. We go purple, we go red, we have different, parents changing their minds on the model that they prefer for their kids. What model can we put in place that will weather those bumps in the road, so to speak? And this is the one that seems to be the most flexible going forward.
How much work has been done with teachers who are not currently teaching concurrently to prepare them for this model? Have they been, how much work has been done with teachers around this?
So the distance learning model that we put in place is something that is relatively geographically neutral. So recall that our distance learning plan, we said what we want is we want timely feedback. We want teachers using Google Classroom and Seesaw. We want, I don't want to go through but that whole distance learning plan could be implemented face-to-face, right? The focus on small group instruction, that could happen face-to-face. It could happen via distance learning, or it could happen concurrently. So students, teachers using the technology that we've taught them so far, the learning platforms that they're currently using, all of those things would transfer over. The things that we feel like, and again, we want to survey the staff to see what kind of professional learning they want, but we're trying to anticipate what they might need. What we're thinking that they might need is technology setup. So my team went around today looking at all the different technology setups that teachers have across the district, how they're currently doing live streaming. And so we'll show them how different ways to set up their technology. And we know that some teachers set up they have their kids on their screen, but they have that behind the students so that when they're looking out into their classroom, they see all their students and then they see the students virtually. Different setup there.
Unmute myself. If there's a small group of people doing this and it looks really good, you know, I taught next door to Lena for a long time, so I know what an amazing teacher she is, right? And so this looks really good, but how has this been dispersed through the rest of the district for people to gain expertise and understanding of this model? And how would this be different in elementary than middle school, which learning is different in elementary and middle school by nature, but what kind of an impact would that have for our families to be navigating two models if they have a foot in both places?
Right, so all these questions are very valid questions. I'll just remind the board that the request for this meeting was to walk through some different models. At this point then, after going forward from here is where we would begin all that whole process. Let's engage the teacher. We've got teacher advisory actually later this week.
Okay.
We would engage parents and talking to them about a little bit more about what the models would do for them in terms of their schedules and those kinds of pieces. Yeah, so it's a very preliminary discussion at this point.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why the implementation date wouldn't be till January. We'd love to move that out a little bit, but we've got a lot of professional learning that we need to do. I believe that there's live streaming going on in every school. We know that this is a process that will take some time for teachers to learn, and we know that there's no expectation that teachers will be able to do every content area immediately. The way that many of the schools that are doing it currently started is they rolled it in slowly. So the Farms is doing, I think almost every classroom at the Farms is doing live streaming. They started by just doing morning meetings. Then they added another content area in as they felt more comfortable. Then they started adding more content areas in. So they just kind of started rolling that in until they had reduced the amount of asynchronous work and more of it became live. So it would be a slow process. Certainly the expectation wouldn't be that teachers would be experts at it January 18th.
Andrew, you had questions?
Did. So address some of the concerns we've heard from parents about access to immersion, those opportunities, our students with IEPs. How would this address some of those things?
Yeah, great question. So we've heard immersion families say, with being at school 2 days a week and then learning from home 3 days a week, that's not a true immersion program. If you had students that were Zooming in, they could get the language components. So if for example, we've got some kids that are in person, the kids that are at home aren't just doing asynchronous work at home, they're actually Zooming in to be able to get that lesson. So they're hearing the language. They're not just sitting at home doing paperwork. And you heard Chris mention that the special day class students would be there 4 days a week. Our students with learning disabilities, same thing. Instead of sitting at home doing asynchronous work by themselves or with the support of their parents, they're actually Zoomed into the classroom and they're getting that support from their teacher, from their peers. And when you look at this model from an equity lens, we want to work with the principals and the teachers to build in an instructional delivery model that includes small group instruction, that includes additional support for our students who need it. It's a great question. And definitely something we considered when we thought about the concurrent model.
And so I'm glad you brought that. That brings me to my next question. So in the initial portion of your presentation, you said that there was a review of different models
that were brought to us tonight, where did those come from? I mean, did we see them from other districts? Did you guys evaluate more and then didn't bring those to us? And if so, why weren't those brought to us? And where'd they come from? Where'd we find them? Is there any evidence to show that they work?
So what we did is we looked at models that were happening at other districts. So that AMPM model, you've heard about that probably in the news. The AB cohort, the AB with kids zooming in was kind of something that's already happening at the middle school, just not to the extent that happening with fewer minutes. We need probably more minutes, and it's happening voluntarily. We probably need not voluntarily. We need it required. What we did was the lead team, our principals, our classified managers, we had a big meeting and multiple meetings, went through all of these models, talked about the pros and cons of each of the models, and brought each of the models to you and showed you a list of the pros and cons that we came up with.
Okay, so in the county or where we were looking, are there any other models for 5 days other than just 100% going into classrooms? I know there's an AM/PM style for that, correct? So is that part of, I'm just trying to understand what this looks like. So if there's a 5-day component, is there a 5-day component to this plan?
So the 5-day, there is a 5-day component. The first model that we showed you where kids are coming back. Kids are coming back 5 days. In that case, we have as one parent mentioned, we have a distance learning strand that's still operating. So that distance learning strand would still be the distance learning strand. Those kids wouldn't come back in. So class sizes would be reduced some. They wouldn't be reduced to the point that we could have 6 feet apart. I believe that there might be some classrooms where we could keep kids 6 feet apart, but not district-wide. So we do have a 5. Now you can look at the AM/PM or the kinder AM/PM. You can look at that as a 5-day-a-week plan. You can look at some of the other models as 5 days a week, but it's shortened. So for example, the AM/PM with the alternate, or the AB cohort with the alternate Zoom, kids are actually engaging with their teacher 5 days a week. It's just not always live in person. So if I were an A student, I would go to school on Monday, Tuesday. I would Zoom with my teacher on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. So I would be in school 5 days a week.
Okay, and that's a separate model from the concurrent model?
Yes. Yeah,
okay. So is there anything in our concurrent model that could say we have kids coming back 5 days a week, or we have a plan to phase in 5 days a week? Is there anything in there? I'm not sure if I saw it, but I saw kindergarten. I was a little confused because I saw kindergarten, but I was wondering if there's any discussions, or if you all had discussions about phasing it up, going from grades, grade to grade to grade, looking at that.
No, that is another option. No, and to answer your first question, the concurrent model is still an AB hybrid.
Okay, so when you guys were looking at models to bring forward, was one of those models, a phase-in potentially of going grade to grade?
No, but that could definitely be done as well.
Okay.
Yes. You could roll in yes, you could roll in kindergarten, roll in first grade, roll in second grade if you wanted to do that as well. Yeah.
And at this point, one of the things that we heard here tonight and from a lot of teachers is there's a difference between middle school and elementary school. So how do we plan to address that in the concurrent model if that's where we end up going?
Well, I'll just jump in. I'll just tell you that there are many school districts, or some anyway, who haven't even opened their middle schools because they can't figure out how to get them in safely. Power being one of them. We've got our kids in, so I feel really good about that. Our kids have been on campus for 7 weeks now, 2 days a week. 2 days a week. So in order to, yeah, it's the scheduling that gets really tricky for the middle school students. So next door in Santee, their plan is to bring back students K-8. They have K-8 schools. They don't have standalone middle schools. So the middle school students will be coming back on a shorter day. And without some of the electives. So here, again, this concurrent model seems to be a model that you would still allow, it would be the easiest to work with the middle school schedules. All right, so the kids could be in class, but then also zooming in when they're at home.
Okay. Well, I certainly would hope that we can look at how we can address that so we don't try to put one size fits all on our middle schools.
Right.
I think we should look at that certainly moving forward.
So the benefit about a concurrent model is that it is work. Right now we have concurrent models going on in the middle school. Our immersion classes are concurrent. Our immersion Mandarin classes are concurrent. So the good thing about this concurrent model is that you don't have to have a separate middle school and elementary school plan. So in English, you go to English and everybody starts, kids are at home, Rhonda's at home, you're in school, you both come in for the first 15 minutes for a whole group lesson. Then you go into small groups. Rhonda's here, you're at home, you come into for a small group, and it will work there. It will work in a middle school English class. It will also work in a fourth grade class, in a first grade class. The same model would work. So with an equity-based concurrent model, and we'll work to build that instructional plan with the teachers, but in that model, there's no need to have a different plan.
So I'm wondering what that instructional plan with the teachers will look like, because of the fact that we'll go away for winter break, right? And then come back. And if you're talking about not being able to implement this until the 18th, will they have dedicated days of training? Will school will be closed, or what will that look like?
Yeah, so we have our January PD day. We have some PLC time. We're scheduling regardless for whatever might happen. We've scheduled some concurrent instruction for our January PD day. Our principals have already been working with their teachers. Lots of teachers are playing with it already. More and more teachers are playing with it. And we know that, so right now we don't have students on Wednesday. So we'll be using some of the Wednesday time to build some capacity with teachers. We've been doing a lot of virtual trainings, building videos and sending videos out for teachers to learn virtually. And again, when we start, it'll be a slow roll in. So it won't be full on every content area. It'll be, this is how you use the technology. Let's give it a try.
So it seems just from this conversation and the presentation and everything that the district is a big fan of the concurrent model, that's the model that they feel is the best suiting for students, period, right?
In conversations with the district lead team, including the principals, and the conversations that Andy and I have, we work with our consultants, we feel like this is the most equitable model for students. And again, the principals felt like, regardless of the amount of time that we stay in this hybrid model, that this would be a good thing to do, this concurrent learning, because of the benefit for how it could impact in-person instruction as well. It has some positive benefits all around the board. My advice would be to look in your crystal ball, as Andy mentioned, try to figure out what you would like to do in the long run. If it is that we would like to start phasing in-person instruction as quickly as possible, then I think that we would not want to try to implement this training, and I think that we would probably need to shift to something that's a little bit more manageable while we start thinking about moving it to full in-person.
Thank you.
Have you heard anything about like the behaviors of the kids at home on Zoom distracting the classes, whether it's in middle school? I think it's more likely to happen in middle school. Are the teachers that are doing it now, do you know if they're having problems with that or not?
Yes, I've heard two. I've heard a couple of different things. I've heard that it's, I won't say easy. Again, the teachers that are doing it now are just trying it out. They're not experts at this. They haven't had any training. They're trying it out. But it is a challenge trying to engage the groups of the students that are on the computer and the students that are in person, both at the same time. That's a challenge. That's something that they're going to need to build some expertise with. I have heard some of our middle school science and math teachers are expressing concerns that hands-on kind of stuff, that even if they send kits home with their students, that it is difficult to have them engaging in hands-on while there's kids in person engaging hands-on. So that would have to be something that we'd have to work through, so that, you know, we'd have to figure that out with the teachers, to figure out how to get that done. But yes, I've heard that it's not easy.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think one of the reasons why this conversation is difficult is because there is no perfect model at this point.
Absolutely.
Coming back to school full time, as I said at the beginning, is what we all want to get to at some point. The question is, in my mind, the question is the risk that we want to run. I think I'm very concerned about consistency for our staff, students, and families, and I'm just worried about it. If we open up full time, we saw what happened in some neighboring districts, and that was more disruptive than trying to tweak what they had in place. Doesn't mean it would happen here necessarily, but that's a concern. That's a concern. Now, if the health department changes their rules about contact tracing, then the equation changes again on us. But currently, that's a constraint that we have to live with. So to answer your question earlier, we could present a plan that had kindergarten coming back fully, first grade coming back fully, rolling in different grade levels. You're still, again, it's still that risk of, if there's a case and you're having to close those classes down again, would that happen?
Well, I'm not necessarily here to say that that's what we should do. I'm expecting that when you guys are going through models, to bring that forward to us as a discussion. Essentially, when we've made, myself, I've made sort of my position clear on many different items. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, no, and I hear you. The first slide was the 5-day model, and so there are different variations of how we might do that.
I'll say that as I was working with the principals trying to put this together, the point that kept coming up was it was about social distancing. If we want to maintain social distancing, there are these things that we can do. If everything is a give and take, right? So you give a little here, you can take a little there. So if we can give on social distancing, then that opens up a wide variety of things that we can do in terms of bringing students back, right? So if we say, okay, it says social distancing when practicable. If we say we're okay with giving on that yet more, then I can bring you, kindergarten, then first, then second. I can bring you K through 5 starting, 6 through 8 doing something different. I can bring you a ton of different models. But I think that the thing that is the pivot point here for me is whether we want to maintain social distancing or not. And if I can have some directive on that, then I think I can bring you what you're looking for.
I also say the other thing to consider, what was brought up last month, I think it was Trustee Taylor who had mentioned this, that we do have our neighboring district who's going to be planning to open on November 30th. Watch and see how it goes over there. I will say that there's a couple of other districts that, as I mentioned, were attempted and were not successful ultimately, but that's something to watch as well.
I'm not comfortable with coming back full-time yet because we can't get the distancing. And while some science may say that children don't spread it, I'm not sure we know that for sure. Even staff spreading it to staff is an issue if everyone's on campus full-time. So that's my personal view, is that I would like to see us go forward with the concurrent model. I think that's the best one for all the students. Anybody else?
I'm not comfortable bringing kids back. I've made my point very clear on that. And as I spent my whole Sunday making phone calls and sending more kids home, you know, that we're going to now be distance learning instead of in-person learning. If we can't maintain the social distancing, then I think that we're opening ourselves up to closing down completely, which is, in my mind, something that is more terrifying than any model that we could pick up. We need our kids in school, at least for those parents who agree to send them to school at least part of the time. I don't know about the concurrent model. I would like to see more research done and more word spread among the schools and have, I believe that teachers will teach their heart out, but they need to have a little bit of buy-in to what they're doing. And so we need to do some more educational work around our teachers with that, in my opinion. I don't think that it's something that we can just spring on people. I know that my teachers wouldn't appreciate that.
Right.
And so I'm looking at how would I want my teachers to feel, you know?
Sure.
So I want to do what's best for kids always first. And so we have kids in school. I want to keep them in school, but I also want them to get the best education, and they're going to get that better education if the teachers are passionate about what they're doing.
I can see that. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I hate unmuting myself. I think what I'll say is, you know, in the past, in our board meetings on this, I've made myself pretty clear on some of my positions, so I'm not going to be a broken record. What I will say is, you know, my goal, like all of ours, is for the best education of our students, like the quality I got when I was here in school. I am concerned about some of the things in a concurrent model. I don't see, to me, at least at this point, I don't see that we're addressing the difference between middle school and elementary school. I'd like to look at that. I think we should. I think we need to. I think we need to have clarity on what a 5-day model for some of our parents in the future would look like. I think we need to know what that looks like. I think we need to provide that clarity. And I think we need to get that input from the teachers on any model that we're going to change to, if it's the majority of the board's decision to change to a model. So that's my last thought.
I completely agree about the buy-in for the teachers. Some teachers are doing it already and my understanding is very successful with it, but that's, maybe it's not for everybody. And so, do you have any idea, Dr. Reed?
I think that almost all of Lakeside Farms is doing it to some extent. All the Mandarin version is doing it. The middle school immersion classes are doing it. I know that there's teachers trying it at every site. I'll say that for a model that, I'll say that this is something that started at the sites that we're saying, okay, it looks like we've got some momentum here. Let's latch onto that and see if we can continue it. This isn't something that we said, okay, this is brand new, we're going to throw it out onto everybody. Mm-hmm. This is something that, again, teachers were already doing. They're talking. You heard Dave Hartwig talk about he's doing it in his classroom, unsolicited. So what percentage of teachers should be doing it at this point? It's something that hasn't even been brought to their attention yet. It's a wellspring. It's kind of bubbling up, and something that we thought, if it's bubbling up, let's see if we can build on that momentum, which is much better, I think you would agree, than pulling something out of the sky.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like spreading that word, spreading that expertise from the teachers that are doing it really, really well to guide other teachers into it. And what is that going to look like? And then again, just that whole buy-in piece. I think it is really interesting, and I don't think we have to have a one-size-fits-all model. You know, I mean, I did like what you were saying around our special day classes, you know, and what is the size of those classes? And if there's only 8 kids in a class, well, then what would be the disadvantage to having them go a fuller day, 4 days a week, you know, go a full day so that they're getting that support?
I have experience with the split roster half day. That was a principal at a school. And the rest of the district, there were 2 pilot models of this half-day split roster for kindergarten, where half the kids were coming in the morning and half the kids are coming in the afternoon, and we were comparing that to full day, 24 kids full day.
Mm-hmm.
And the data coming out of our school and the pilot school, the data was better than the other schools, so it works. And so I was comfortable with the AM PM for kinder. The feedback that we got from the principals is that with sanitation in between AM, PM, middle school it would shorten middle school minutes by 41 minutes per class. So we did say, okay, what if we didn't do it there? We just did an elementary. So then what you have is every elementary class dismissing half or even staggered dismissing, and then our teachers look for 6.75 hours. So there's a small window there. So if kids would come, then we'd have to be able to sanitize every single room before the second cohort could come. I know
That's
you know
the
what
world
I'm
I
talking
live
about.
in, so you have to have the proper equipment to do that, which we don't have at this point here.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that we worked through to try to bring the models that we thought would work for us.
It wasn't too long ago that kindergarten did AM, PM, you know. I mean, my oldest son did half a day, and my other children went full day. They were the very first year of full day kindergarten.
But the difference between that model and this one is that your kids, kindergarten, if they went to AM, there were 24 kids in that class. In this model, there would be 10 or 12 kids in that class, and 10 or 12 kids in the afternoon. So the impact is exponential.
So where we are at this point then is what we're bringing to you is we are prepared to start working on bringing back special day students 4 days a week. We'll start working with those families and seeing what their readiness is for that. We're prepared to bring back kindergartners on an AM PM model. We'll start working with those families and see what their readiness and desire is on that. And then we're ready to start working with staff on what a concurrent model would look like in more detail, both with our principals and teachers going forward. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to?
How is that decision made? Like, are we to vote on that and meet in the future after we do a little bit more links and track out there?
We can
or?
do that. The item tonight was a discussion item.
Right.
It wasn't an action item. It was not an action item. So yeah, so we could bring that back for board action at the near future date.
Okay.
Anybody else? I'll have a question about the distance learning strand. So I would think their curriculum is the same, but the mom asked about it, so I'll ask about it. Is the distance learning strand should be teaching the same material, right?
So our district has curriculum adoptions. And when we say curriculum in this sense, we're talking about materials and things that we buy, the adopted wonders and those things. And that should be the first resource that teachers use. But our teachers' main goal or their main expectation is that they're teaching the standards. We've gone through a process over the summer of aligning those standards so that the distance learning students, the students that are in hybrid, should be getting the same standards in the same order for English language arts. We haven't done that work for math yet. You heard that was some of the summer work that we had done. So that's what you should see. You should see students getting the same standards, and we're working on getting the same formative assessments. The materials that they can use, our adopted curriculum is their first resource, and then they can use whatever they want to use that's Common Core aligned to be able to teach those standards. So what we're not trying to do is we're not trying to say we want every teacher across our district to be reading out of the textbook every day. We want to put some of the professionalism back in the profession, and we want to say if these are the standards that you're supposed to teach, and here's a common formative assessment that everybody's going to give, we'll do that work. And then when we come together to talk about our data, then we're going to say, Dr. Johnson, you taught the same thing that I taught. Your kids did really well in this aspect. What did you do? So we can share best practices. And that's our goal. Our goal is not to say, here's a curriculum that was written by somebody in New York that doesn't take into consideration our kids, doesn't take into consideration our families, doesn't necessarily even take into consideration the California Common Core state standards, and to plow through it page by page. That's not what we expect.
Thank you. Do you have anything else? Well, then this meeting's adjourned.